Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Did you notice we switched places? Never mind why. Also, sorry we're a little bit later today. We had a meeting this morning. We had a meeting with a group called Alliance Defending Freedom. And they're doing a wonderful job in the U.S. helping defending our freedoms and defending freedom for the gospel and many freedoms for America. I want to check them out, Alliance Defending Freedom. Google them and you'll find where they're at. So anyway, but today we want to talk to you about we call gender balance. And this morning I was thinking about this as I was reading a story in the Bible. And probably most of us gravitate to one side or the other. Some of us are a little more compassionate. Others are more of a rule follower or discipline focused and just following the rules, that kind of thing. But we need both. So this morning I was reading in Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. And the story is, Jesus is in the synagogue, and a woman comes in who's bent over. She can't even stand up straight. And Jesus later says it's because Satan had bound her in this. And so Jesus calls her over, and he tells her she's loosed, and he puts his hand on her. She's healed. Well, the ruler of the synagogue got indignant. He didn't like that. And he says to the people, probably something like this, except in Hebrew. He said, hey, you people, there's 6 days to do your work. Come on those days to get your healings. Mm-hmm. And Jesus said, you're a hypocrite. Even you on the Sabbath will untie your donkey, take it to the water so donkey doesn't starve or thirst, whatever types of thirst. And he says, this woman has been bound by Satan for so many years. Shouldn't she be loosed on this day? So as I thought about that, I realized, okay, so there's a couple of things working here. This compassion, this other thing that makes us follow rules and just do what is right and all that. And this time it wasn't in balance. Jesus was moved with compassion, and he healed the woman. The man was just following the rules, doing what he believed was the right thing. It was so rigid, it actually made him a hypocrite. It was so rigid that he couldn't even see. He was blind to the fact that he broke the Sabbath himself by untying his donkey and getting it water, doing something so much less important than this woman whom he says a son of Abraham or a daughter of Abraham, being released of her infirmity. And so you look at that and you might say, oh my goodness, the compassion is so much better, it's so much more important, let's just throw out the rules. And yet that's not the answer either, because we have to find a way to do both. We have to find a way to carry both. Another example of this, in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, many of you, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? And he says, many of you will say to me on that day, judgment day, we prophesied in your name, we healed people, cast out demons. And he will say, depart from me, I never knew you, you who practice lawlessness. These are hard statements, but I think they're important. Jesus said them. What's he saying there? Number one, you might be moved with compassion to do a lot of good for people, heal people, pray for people, prophesy over them, set them free from demons. But I think what Jesus is saying is if you don't walk obediently with him, also do what is right, follow the rules, and the more disciplined side of life, I think what he's saying is the Lord's going to look at you and say, well, I recognize my gifts in you. I see the good things you did, but I don't see me in you. I don't see my heart in you. I don't see my ways in you. I don't see you living the way I lived. I don't see me in you. And that would be I don't want to hear that when I meet the Lord. But so doing good and just being compassionate without the obedience, without following the rules, without the discipline part of it, leads to lawlessness, is what Jesus was saying. So we need both. And I would suggest that probably in general, our culture today is moving not towards everybody being disciplined and obedient, but moving towards what we call compassion, not godly compassion, but a human-based compassion that leads us to follow what we feel, and sometimes people say follow their heart, which is good, but we need to follow our heart, but we need to also add the obedience to it, or it isn't. We won't find what God God's heart in what we're doing. So we can fall off the horse on either side. Matthew 12:7, the disciples have been picking grains of wheat on the Sabbath and eating them because they were hungry, and they were condemned for that. And Jesus said, he said, if you had known what this means, I desire compassion and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. So, on one side we can become full of feelings and not really follow God, and not in our heart on the inside be like God. And the other side, we can try to do everything that's right and not have a heart of compassion, and be judgmental, condemning, and hypocritical in what we do. So, anyway, you want to say something? I was going to tie this into
Go ahead.
Family and marriage a little bit. So, I think God has done something brilliant in putting men and women together, and the differences in men and women. This is a generalization, but in general, women, mothers, tend to be the more compassionate. In general, men tend to be more the rule followers, maybe more disciplined, but maybe strict and focusing on strength rather than just compassion, things like that. And I think it's brilliant. God's design, the way He designed women, the way He designed marriage, put us together to bring things together to make a whole. When we use what God has given us both, and we receive from what has God given us both. And so we thought of a few examples in our life of how that was important, and how I needed Lori's perspective and she needed mine. And
I love too that there is the motherhood and the fatherhood of God. You know, our marriage together and our parenting is representing God the Father, the motherhood and the fatherhood. And I've heard, it talks about the lion and the lamb. So there's the disciplined side, there's the strong side, there's the affectionate side, there's the loving side, there's the gentle side, and both are needed. And especially as we were trying to think of examples in our life, we were just thinking back to our parenting and what we went through. And I can remember when we first had our little Caleb Michael Byrne, and he was so tiny, and I think he was only just maybe a couple months old, and he just got so much love and affection and feeding and holding and sleeping and changing his diapers and doing everything to make him comfortable. And when he was finally tired and it was time to put him to bed, and I could tell, he just needed to sleep. And so we put him down, and he was crying. And here's this tiny, tiny little person that is just brand new to us.
Can you feel the compassion?
And so we're sitting out, it's summertime, we're sitting out on the back porch.
And I think we'd gone in at least once or twice and checked on him.
Well, we hadn't first.
It was okay.
First, we thought, okay, you know what? We knew when we put him down, he had just been changed, he didn't have a diaper pin sticking in him, he'd been fed, he'd been held, he'd had all this stuff, he really needed to sleep. And so we were sitting out on the back porch, and I think he'd probably been crying maybe for 20 minutes, just crying, in his bed. And I said, I'm just gonna go check on him. And Barry just he just put his hand on me. He goes, just wait. He goes, just wait. And so I sat back and we waited. And anyway, we went through this several times. And finally, he fell asleep. But it was after he'd cried for 45 minutes. And as a new mom, I wasn't afraid to let my babies cry, because I knew sometimes they just needed to. That was part of what they needed to do. I knew that was a way for them to tell me that they needed something from me. But when they were just crying, it was okay to let them cry. But it was hard for me to do this. And I wanted to say this because my being able to let Barry lead me with his strength, even though my affection as a mother is equally as important, long story short, our kids all ended up sleeping through the night by 2 months. And it was this whole process of just training them in their sleep, knowing when it was time, they were tired, and not letting the crying and the worry, oh no, they're feeling so bad, or they're feeling abandoned. They didn't at all. All our kids went to bed really well. In fact, I remember when Jeremy was 6 months old, You know, we had him up, and he finally, you could tell he was fussing, and then I started walking towards the bedroom, and he goes like this. He literally just like dove into bed, like,
yeah.
That's what I do, that's what I need.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of Barry's strength that I needed as a compassionate mother to be able to train our kids to be able to be happy in this whole area of sleeping.
Yeah. You know, even as we say this, I'm 65 years old, I think, generation I was raised in, the value for helping to train in strength and discipline, and not only feelings, was a lot more important, a lot valued, a lot higher. And even as we talk about this, I kind of feel like, oh, this sounds so bad, but to make a baby cry that long, leave them cry that long, and yet I believe it was a good thing in that situation. It was a good thing, and it goes both ways. We thought of another situation where, as the boys got older, I don't know how old, maybe Caleb was 6, 7, and Jeremy was 4 or 5, something like that. I'd come home
a little bit younger than that.
Yeah, even younger than that. Okay, I would come home from work, and Jeremy would come running to me, ready to play and wrestle and things like that, and Caleb was sitting over on the side many times. And I thought, well, if he wants to join in, he'll come and join in. But Lori, being more aware and more sensitive to what's going on with them, said to me one day, you need to invite Caleb in. He's not like Jeremy. He's not gonna put himself in the situation. He's gonna jump in. He's gonna wait to be invited in. So I did, and she was exactly right. I needed to invite him in, and he did want to play. And there, I just needed the compassion, her awareness and sensitivity to help me see what I couldn't see.
Yeah, it's really a good thing to have a father and a mother.
Yeah.
To be able to bring our differences as men and women. God knew all this. He knew that children would need a mom and a dad in the way that we are created and what we could bring to our children.
Yeah. So there's no excuse for saying, oh, my wife raises the kids, or or one of them, he does all the discipline or whatever. We need to play both those roles. One other thing, which I think is an important story we talked about. You want to tell about Caleb when he was in high school?
Oh yeah, he was on the varsity basketball team as a junior, and there was a very tough coach. And we played junior basketball, the boys played all growing up, and so we were in basketball and we knew how tough coaches could be. But this guy was really abusive, and Caleb was actually contemplating. He'd been on the team he'd been playing basketball for 3 years, and he was on the varsity team, but he was actually trying to figure out how he could get out of playing basketball. And I didn't know this, but one night I had a dream, and I dreamed that Caleb was just sobbing and he was crying, and he came to me, and I said, Caleb, what's wrong? And I can't even remember, but it was like there was something really bad that was bothering him, and I can't remember all of the dream, but I remember I felt like I was supposed to tell Caleb this dream. And when I told him this dream, his face just fell, and he goes, Mom, he goes, that is me. He says, I've been trying to figure out how I could break my arm or wreck my ankle to get off the team. I mean, that's how controlling this whole thing was. And he was right in the middle of this really bad system. And so it was really cool because God had given me that dream and alerted us to what was going on, because he was going to gut it out like everybody else on the team, and I just gotta. Yeah. But it was just too much, and it wasn't right. And later on, that guy got fired. But he didn't for not until several years later. Yeah. But the thing that was so incredible is we were able to go out, take him out for breakfast, and I remember we were just talking to him about the whole situation, and you just gave him the freedom. You said, Caleb, you need to decide what you want to do. We didn't even tell him what to do, but it was so cool because it was like he needed to have the okay to make the decision. Yes, this is abusive and I'm getting off. And you know what? He went ahead and he did that. And when he did that, the teacher had him in some of his other classes, and started talking about what a wuss he was and how he quit the team, was saying all these negative things about him. And Caleb was so good. He just went through it because he was at peace about doing what he did. Well, several of the key players on the basketball team, after Caleb did that, they quit that season because it was just too much. It was wrong. And then later we'd heard that this coach had lost his job for being just overly abusive. And so,
and that was hard for me because I thought, you finish what you start.
right, and we both felt that.
Yeah, and yet there comes a point where you have to balance these things. If just doing the right thing to do it anyway, no matter what cost.
What expense?
Well, sometimes you do depending on the situation. But in this situation, it was an elective thing that he was doing, and it hurt the team and that. But I think it was good for Caleb to be able to make that choice and say, I'm not going to put myself under this any longer. So, I guess the bottom line is God did something brilliant when He made most women more compassionate, sensitive, understanding, caring, and they do great. That mothers need that, children need that from their mothers, and most men are probably more strong and focusing on strength and I want to say discipline, but a lot of men aren't disciplined. So I'm not sure what the other word is for all this, but if we can bring those things together, we can really represent the Godhead so much better, represent God's compassion and His strength and His goodness and righteousness. And so I just want to bless you all who are listening, whether you're married and you need to work this out with your spouse, or if you're dating, to be able to respect and honor the differences that God put in each other. It's amazing. It creates a perfect balance. It will make you a better person. It'll make you more understanding. It'll make you better parents. And so we bless you to receive and accept what God has put inside of you, and make the most of it. Do the best of it with it that you can. And we bless you in Jesus' name.